Moving to a big coastal city was supposed to be a fresh start. After years of feeling stuck in my hometown, I was ready for a change. New job, new environment, new opportunities. I landed a decent job right away, marketing assistant for a mid-sized firm. It wasn't my dream gig, but it was steady work, and it paid well enough to afford a one-bedroom apartment on my own. The apartment was in an old brick building on a quiet street, but the inside had been completely remodeled. New hardwood floors, updated appliances, modern fixtures. It was small, but it felt brand new. It was exactly what I wanted. The rent was reasonable, right at the edge of my budget but still within reach. With my salary, I could afford it comfortably as long as I kept things in check. For the first time in my life, I had my own space. No roommates, no family hovering around, no one to answer to. Just peace, quiet, and independence. I'd wake up early, head to work, and come home to my sleek little apartment, where I could unwind and enjoy the privacy I'd always craved. For a while, things were good. Then, just a couple of months in, everything fell apart. The entire department got cut. Budget issues, they said. One moment, I had a stable job and a steady income. The next, I was out of work with no warning. At first, I told myself it was temporary. I'd find something else. I'd been through worse. But job hunting wasn't easy, especially in a big city where competition was fierce. Weeks passed, and my savings began to dwindle. The bills started piling up fast: electric, water, car insurance, and then there was the rent. I picked up door dashing to keep my head above water. It was exhausting work, spending hours driving around the city delivering food, but it brought in just enough cash to cover groceries and utilities. Still, I knew it wasn't enough. Rent day loomed closer, and I realized I wouldn't be able to make it on my own anymore. That's when I knew I needed a roommate. It was the last thing I wanted to do. I liked my space, my privacy. Sharing a one-bedroom apartment with a stranger wasn't exactly part of my plan. But sometimes, life doesn't give you a choice. So, I posted an ad on a rental site and crossed my fingers, hoping to find someone normal, someone responsible. That's how Jackie came into my life. She responded almost immediately, said she needed a place right away. Her messages were brief, no long backstory, no questions about the apartment. She just needed somewhere cheap and fast. We agreed to meet the next day. When she showed up, she only had one suitcase. It felt a little odd, but people lived light in big cities, right? Maybe she was starting over, just like me. I told her she could take the pull-out couch in the living room, and she agreed without hesitation. She moved in that same day. At first, things were fine. Then, within a few days, the weirdness started. One night, I came home late from a long shift of deliveries. It had been a rough evening, heavy rain, bad tips, and drivers cutting me off at every turn. By the time I reached my apartment building, I was drained. I climbed the stairs slowly, listening to the familiar creaks of the old wooden steps. When I reached my door, I stood for a moment, letting out a long breath before unlocking it and stepping inside. The apartment was completely dark. I flipped the light switch near the entrance. Nothing. Great, I muttered, realizing the overhead light in the entryway must have burned out. I kicked off my shoes, letting them thud against the wall, and walked toward the living room. As my eyes adjusted to the dim glow from the streetlights outside, I froze. Jackie was sitting on the pull-out couch, not watching TV, not reading a book, just sitting, in the dark, staring at the wall. Her back was straight, her hands folded neatly in her lap, and she didn't so much as flinch when I walked in. "Hey," I said, my voice breaking the eerie silence. I reached for the lamp on the side table and flicked it on. A warm, yellow glow spread through the room, illuminating her pale face. "Everything okay?" For a long moment, she didn't move. Then, slowly, she turned her head to look at me. Her eyes seemed distant, unfocused, like she wasn't fully there. "I'm just listening," she said softly. Her voice was flat, almost monotone, but there was a strange undercurrent to it, something that made the hairs on my arms stand up. "Listening to what?" I asked, frowning. She blinked once, slowly, as if the question confused her. "I like to be alone with my thoughts," she said. Her lips curled into a faint smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Sometimes my thoughts have things to say." I stood there, unsure how to respond. It was weird. No, it was really weird. But I told myself not to overthink it. People had their quirks, and everyone processed things differently. Maybe she was dealing with something I didn't know about. After all, she never talked much about her past or why she had been in such a hurry to move in. "Right," I said awkwardly, rubbing the back of my neck. "Well, I'm gonna head to bed." She didn't say anything. She just kept staring at me with that distant expression. I hesitated for a moment, then turned and walked down the hall to my bedroom, closing the door behind me. I stood there in the dark for a moment, my hand still on the doorknob. Something about the way she had been sitting there, completely still in the dark, sent a shiver down my spine. I shook it off and climbed into bed. But that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something in the apartment had shifted. And after that, things in the apartment started to feel wrong. Every day before I left, I locked both the closet and my bedroom door. I was careful about it. One day, I came home, unlocked my bedroom, and immediately noticed something was off. The closet door was wide open. I checked the lock. It was still engaged. It hadn't been tampered with. I still had the only key. How the hell had it opened? Nothing was missing, though. My laptop, some important documents, a couple of things from my late grandfather that I could never replace, were all still there. It wasn't just the closet either. Books I left on my nightstand would end up on the kitchen counter. My shoes would move from the door to the living room. At first, I wondered if Jackie was messing with me. But why? She barely spoke to me, barely acknowledged my presence. Then one night, I woke to the sound of glass shattering. I bolted out of bed, heart racing, and found the bathroom mirror shattered. Jackie was asleep, or at least pretending to be. The apartment was quiet except for the faint creak of the pull-out couch. I rationalized it. Maybe the mirror had cracked on its own. Temperature changes? Faulty installation? But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. The worst night came about 2 weeks after Jackie moved in. I was lying in bed, half watching some random show on TV, trying to unwind after another long day of deliveries. The apartment was quiet, the only sounds coming from the show. A crime drama with static-filled police radios and distant sirens. At first, I thought the low, rumbling noise I heard was part of the soundtrack. But when I paused the TV, the growling continued. It was deep and guttural, the kind of sound that makes your chest tighten and your instincts scream at you to stay put. I sat up slowly, listening. The sound was coming from the living room. We didn't have a pet. The building didn't even allow animals. My heart started to race as I swung my legs off the bed and stood. I grabbed my phone, flipping on the flashlight. The beam cut through the dark hallway, illuminating the familiar walls and furniture. The growling got louder as I approached the living room, low and menacing, vibrating through the air like a warning. "Jackie?" I called softly. No response. The hair on the back of my neck stood up as I reached the living room doorway. The hallway light switch was just a few steps away, but I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the flashlight on my phone. Something was there. Near the front door, I could see 2 piercing yellow eyes staring back at me through the darkness. They didn't blink. My chest tightened, and I took a shaky step forward. The growling deepened, vibrating through the room like distant thunder. I fumbled for the light switch, my fingers trembling. The second the light flickered on, my breath caught in my throat. Jackie was sitting on the floor near the front door, and next to her was a massive black dog. Its fur was thick and matted, clinging to its body in clumps like it hadn't been groomed in years. Its broad head was lowered, and its lips curled back to reveal sharp, yellowed teeth. I stared, heart pounding. It was the dog's eyes I had seen in the dark. Those eerie, glowing yellow eyes. "Jackie," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Where the hell did you get that dog?" She turned her head slowly, almost mechanically, and met my gaze. Her expression was eerily calm, her eyes dark and distant. "He's just visiting," she said softly. "Visiting?" I repeated, feeling my pulse quicken. "What do you mean, visiting? We can't have animals in the building. You know that." Jackie didn't respond. She stood up slowly, her movements deliberate, and pulled out the couch bed without a word. The dog followed her, its eyes never leaving me. It moved with an unsettling grace, stepping onto the pull-out couch and curling up at Jackie's feet like it belonged there. The growling never stopped. I stood there for a long moment, frozen in place, watching the two of them. Jackie laid down, pulling the blanket over herself as if this were the most normal thing in the world. The dog rested its head on its paws, but its eyes stayed locked on me, glowing faintly in the dim light. I backed away slowly, my hands shaking. "Jackie," I said again, barely able to get the words out. "You can't keep a dog here. It's against the rules." She smiled faintly, her eyes half-lidded. "Don't worry, he won't stay long." With that, she rolled over, turning her back to me. I stood in the doorway for a moment longer, my mind racing. My mouth was dry, my palms clammy. The dog's growling echoed through the room, low and relentless, like the sound of distant thunder rolling in from the ocean. I barely slept that night. I locked my bedroom door, shoved a chair under the handle, and laid in bed with my heart pounding. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those glowing yellow eyes staring back at me. And even through the thick walls of my room, I could still hear the growling. The next morning, the dog was gone. I asked her about it later. "Where's the dog?" She smiled. "He's gone now, but he'll be back when he's needed." "What does that even mean?" I snapped. "He can't come back. No pets allowed, remember?" She just nodded, that unsettling smile never leaving her face. After that, I started having nightmares. In my dreams, the dog stood at the foot of my bed, its yellow eyes glowing in the dark. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, convinced I could hear it growling somewhere in the apartment. And Jackie? Jackie got stranger. One night, I woke to the sound of whispering outside my bedroom door. I opened the door to find her pacing the hallway, whispering in a language I didn't recognize. "Jackie," I called softly. She stopped, staring at me like she didn't recognize me. Then, after a beat, she blinked and smiled. "Sorry, I must have been sleepwalking." The next night it happened again. This time I didn't hold back. "What's going on with you? Do you need help? Do you need to see a doctor?" She tilted her head, her expression eerily blank. "I sold my soul a while back," she said calmly, "but you'll get used to it." My blood ran cold. "What did you say?" Her smile widened. "I sold my soul, but don't worry, it won't affect you. Much." That was it. I'd had enough. "You need to leave, Jackie. You can't stay here anymore." She shrugged. "Okay." That night, I locked my bedroom door and slept with the TV on. The next morning, she was gone. On the coffee table, I found a note. "I'll be back for what's mine." That was over a year ago. Since then, my life has changed in ways I never could have imagined. After months of grinding through job applications and interviews, I finally landed a position at a firm in the exact field I'd been dreaming of since college. The pay is more than I ever thought I'd make at this stage in my life. The benefits are great. I even moved into a new apartment, a sleek 2-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood, just a short walk from my office. It's the kind of life I always pictured when I moved to the city. There's a coffee shop right down the street, one of those cozy local places with the best lattes and croissants you've ever had. It's become part of my routine. I stop by most mornings on my way to work, grab my coffee, and head to the park nearby to clear my head before diving into the day. Things finally felt normal. Until yesterday. I was standing in line at the coffee shop, scrolling through emails on my phone, barely paying attention to the world around me. The line was long, the place packed with people, the hum of conversation blending with the sound of the espresso machine. It was comforting in a way, familiar. Then, someone tapped me on the shoulder. At first, I thought it was a coworker or someone from my building, but when I turned, the blood drained from my face. Jackie. She was standing there, smiling that same unsettling smile I hadn't seen in over a year. Her eyes locked on mine, dark and unreadable, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. "Hi, Matt," she said softly, her voice the same calm, steady tone that haunted my dreams. My heart stopped. Jackie. Her smile widened just slightly, the corners of her mouth twitching in amusement. There was something in her expression that sent a chill down my spine. I managed a weak, hapless smile of my own, my mind racing. I hadn't seen or heard from her in over a year. She was gone, out of my life, out of my thoughts. And yet, here she was, standing inches from me like she'd never left. I didn't know what to say. What could I say? Before I could find my voice, she leaned in slightly, her smile never faltering. "Don't worry, Matt," she said, her voice low and smooth. "I haven't forgotten." My chest tightened. I'm still coming back to get the rest of what's mine. The air seemed to thicken around us, the sounds of the coffee shop fading into the background. I stepped back, my hands trembling. But she was already turning away, disappearing into the crowd. I stood there for a moment, frozen, my pulse pounding in my ears. That night, I couldn't sleep. I laid in bed, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts spiraling. Jackie's words played over and over in my head. "I haven't forgotten. I'm still coming back to get the rest of what's mine." What did she mean? What rest of what's hers? I threw off the blanket and got up, pacing the length of my living room. It was quiet, but the silence felt oppressive, like the walls were pressing in on me. Finally, I went to the window, pressing my hands against the cold glass. The street below was quiet, bathed in the soft glow of the coffee shop's neon sign. The streets were slick from the rain earlier, reflecting the lights in shimmering pools. And then I saw her. Jackie. She was standing across the street under the street lamp, her face partially hidden in shadow, her body unnaturally still. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. She wasn't moving. She wasn't waving or calling out. She was just watching. My heart pounded in my ears as I blinked, hoping she'd disappear. But she didn't. She was still there. Slowly, she tilted her head, the movement subtle, like she was considering something. Then she turned and began walking down the street. That's when the dog emerged from the darkness behind her. The same massive black dog with matted fur and piercing yellow eyes. It padded silently alongside her, its head low, its eyes locked forward. They walked in perfect unison, their silhouettes fading as they turned the corner and disappeared into the night. I stood frozen at the window, my breath fogging up the glass. My mind raced for an explanation. It wasn't her. It couldn't have been. It was just a random person walking their dog. The encounter earlier had me spooked, making me see things that weren't really there. That's all. Jackie was clearly a disturbed person, but she had never posed a threat to my safety. Her cryptic words about coming back for what's mine were just part of whatever condition she was dealing with. Nonsense from someone unwell. And seeing her after all this time? That had to be a coincidence. I was stressed. I was tired. I was letting old, irrational fears resurface. Yeah, that was it. I took a deep breath, stepping back from the window. My reflection stared back at me, pale and wide-eyed. I shook my head. "You're fine," I whispered to myself. "You're just overthinking this. You'll be fine." I desperately wanted to believe that. I couldn't stop thinking about the way she'd stood there, perfectly still in the shadows. And the dog, the way it followed her, its eyes glowing an unnatural yellow. "Jackie, let's never meet, ever, again."